Presenting my presentation for my paper, which was on gamification and its use in education. Gamification is currently a pretty big trend in the markets of corporate training, marketing, and education. It captures the idea that students and young people in general spend a lot of time and put a lot of their efforts into succeeding in video games and mastering video games. And gamification seeks to take that same passion, that same amount of energy, and especially that same amount of time, and pour that into other fields. As a teacher, I became particularly interested in how gamification could apply to the classroom, specifically in ways that it could motivate less motivated students. Not necessarily the students who were struggling because they just didn't get the content, but students who were struggling because they were either too anxious because their skills weren't quite at the mastery level, or students who were just bored because their skills far exceeded what they were expected to do in the classroom, and to bring them back into the happy medium, but more on that later. First off, I want to share, as far as gamification goes, this interesting graphic that I found. Everything I ever needed to know, I learned from gaming, which might not be entirely true. There's a lot of content for sure that you're not going to get in a normal everyday video game. But to be specific here, I'm talking about everything from the multiplayer online role-playing games like World of Warcraft to multiplayer social games that you can play through Facebook like Farmville, or even things that don't follow the format of a traditional game, things that are more like Foursquare. But there are a lot of things that you really can learn that you really do need to know as far as 21st century skills. Gamers who are participating in these games are learning incredibly valuable skills when it comes to communication, collaboration, critical thinking and problem solving skills, and even creativity. So there are a lot of benefits coming out of the gaming world, and I am looking at how to infuse content into that gaming world as well, to make that take the more fully holistic view. So, gamers. There are some gamers out there who are putting in almost as much time as it would take to be a full-time job. Sometimes gamers are putting more time into the games that they're playing than they would an actual full-time job. Now, with that kind of dedication and that kind of effort, I would really like to figure out what it would take to apply this same focus for a lot of these struggling students on things that they're doing in an educational environment. So that's one of the biggest things I wanted to take a look at. When gamification first started to become popular, one of the biggest things that really shocked people in the beginning was the popularity of Foursquare, and how people were so dedicated to either compete against each other to be the mayor of something, some location, by checking in at that place more than any other person could, or by the way that they were competing against the game and trying to earn a variety of different badges. And it almost took on gamification, the idea in the beginning almost took on the idea that, oh, all we need to do is provide these extra kind of illusions of success and rewards, and that'll really trigger the intrinsic rewards, even though we're giving them something that is extrinsic, because this extrinsic reward of receiving a badge is really minimal in the grand scheme of things. Gamification philosophers soon came up with that as the main reason that so many apps were so popular, because they triggered this need to get to the next level, to complete something, to earn experience points, or to collect badges specifically. However, they quickly found out that that intrinsic reward is not driven by the extrinsic reward. That intrinsic reward is actually something that's a little bit deeper, and there's more to the game mechanics of a successful game than just receiving badges. If it were as simple as just getting points, obviously we've had that system in effect since the Industrial Revolution's effect on the educational environment. There are so many things that still persist in our educational environment that were originally brought upon and made even more evident through the Industrial Revolution and what we were creating students to become during that time. We were preparing them to go and work in the factories. Unfortunately, that is not the kind of environment that we're preparing students for anymore. So using some of these same techniques, which could be an entirely different presentation, and I could go on for a while about that, is just not going to be effective anymore. So we can't just take the pointsification or the badgification of education and say, well, that's it. It should work. Why isn't this helping our students? Because there's a lot more to the levels of game mechanics in a successful game. There's a lot more that needs to be put into gamification of learning when it's successful. From what I've seen and from my personal feelings about the subject, it really needs to come down to the sense of a quest. Education should be a journey. That's why learning is so positive and so encouraging for students when they're just entering school, and then we turn it into more of a job, and unfortunately it kind of loses that fun flavor that really entices young learners, especially when they're toddlers and infants. But I think what we need to do is reframe things so that we are capturing that spirit again in the form of a quest, in the form of an adventure. At the heart of that, and based on a lot of other educational research, students need to know where they're headed, where they are, and what it's going to take for them to get there. Having this, and especially having the immediate feedback to see this is what you can do currently, this is what you need to be able to do next, and now go and do it. And giving them the opportunity to practice those skills, develop themselves exactly from where they are to get to where they need to be. Having that map, that overall sense, is an important part of the quest and the adventure, but really it's an incredibly important part of education too. And a lot of the research in balanced assessment is leading us directly to this. What can students do now? What do we need them to do? What are we going to be able to do to help them close that gap? And when students have this map in their own hands to track their own learning, that becomes a really powerful tool for them to find that motivation to see what to do next. Another important element, and this goes back to education from when education, let's even say this, probably before even education was thought of as a concept. The way we were teaching each other, teaching the next generation, that was through stories. And at the heart of all great education, maybe this is just because I'm a language arts teacher, but I believe at the heart of all great education is really a story. And if we can tap into that story element, we can really make education more powerful and bring it back to what it was. A lot of the educational research that has to do with multiple learning strategies and multiple intelligences will bring it back to the story aspect and how we interact with our multiple intelligences to get to the heart, get to that story, and how a story and brain-based learning can make seemingly unrelated facts more relatable to each other, more relatable to us, and really tie everything in together so it sticks in our mind. And you know, this is going to catch me some flack, I know, but the key to all of this, the key to gamification has to be pure enjoyment and fun. Of course, the content has to be an important focus, but for gamification to work well and for education to be back to what it is for the youth before we turned it into a job, before we turned it into a work, and to reignite that passion for learning, we've got to get back to education being about fun, being about trying new things. And on that note, it can also definitely need to be about failure from time to time. If students don't have an opportunity to fail and turn around and learn from the mistakes, then they're not really going to internalize the learning as well as they could. And our traditional points grading system doesn't always allow them to fail and then recover. It'll either let them continue on successfully for those students who are already high achieving and are already going to do what we expect them to do for the level where they are, or it's going to penalize those students who do make an attempt and fail, and it traps them into a cycle of failure that they can't escape from. Gamification seeks to make failure what's going to happen for everyone, but also lets failure be a jumping off point for moving on. If kids are trapped in success, and they never experience failure, they're not going to have as strong of an ability to internalize the information. And of course, on the opposite hand, for those low-motivated students who might possess the skills to master the content, but they just don't have the motivation, failure and being able to return from that failure and turn those failures into successes, that is going to be the key. And gamification allows those students to do that. That's why so many students, they'll spend hours and hours getting frustrated at a video game, but not to the point where they're going to give up. They'll get frustrated to the point where they'll continue on, but we don't see that same perseverance in school. Education experts have what we consider the zone of proximal development. We take a kid from what's known to what is not known by providing the scaffolding in the middle to give them the guidance and the encouragement that they need. Game designers have something that's almost exactly the same, but just thought of in a different way. It's the flow channel. If things are too challenging for the level of skills that students have mastered, they get anxious, they get frustrated, then they shut down. If the skills are there, but they're not meeting the challenges that they need, they get bored, then they shut down. The goal in gaming should be the same as the goal in education, to keep students coming back into the flow channel. They will go out from time to time just in the regular course, but they need to keep coming back into that flow channel in order for that game to be successful, in order for the educational environment to help them be successful. And really, a lot of the things that we have in place already in education, the way that we provide obstacles for students to overcome, the way that we reward them with certain amounts of points, the way that we give them the immediate feedback that they need, a lot of that is already there the way that it should be in this quest and this gamification of learning. But it's really about a reframing. It's really about turning that story that's already there, underlying everything, into the focus, bringing the fun back in, allowing students to fail, and reframing the entire view of everything that we present so that we can call it gamification. Now, for an education or for an ethics and technology presentation, I know this deviates from focusing on the technology so much, but this is kind of an interesting perspective, that this is something that we're pulling from the world of technology that students are immersed in and bringing that into our classroom, not necessarily with new technology, but providing that same kind of environment that we know is successful for them and we know drives them outside of our classes. Of course, it won't be successful for every student, but using this key motivation that's out there is so much more wise than just completely ignoring it. On that note, though, there are a lot of great online resources. In particular, I've been looking into Edmodo because it does allow for the badgification. It allows students to track their progress and how much they have to continue on in a course to be where they need to be. It allows them to interact with each other collaboratively and even competitively when that's appropriate too. Edmodo has been built, obviously you might be able to tell, to look a lot like Facebook, to look a lot like the social media that students are already used to, but it incorporates a lot of this gamification, a lot of these motivators that we have been finding have been really useful for students. So that is my presentation on gamification of education. Thanks for watching.